Hi there, welcome back to the podcast of Wednesday's Child. And guess what? This is the first one of 2023. I almost can't believe I'm saying that word. I don't know why. 2023 sounds even more futuristic. Back in the day as a child, you used to kind of think by this sort of date in the calendar, we'd all be driving around in, spaceships and able to live under the sea or something peculiar like that. So here we are in 2023. Kicking off your podcast delight. Thank you so much for those of you that have got in touch to say, bring it back, where are you? Yes, we have been a little bit quiet over the festive period, but like you all, there are kind of other priorities and just that need to focus and restore and rest and just enjoy the season, which is certainly what Sarah and I have been managing to do against this backdrop of all the kind of crazy stuff that's going on in the world. So here we are again, and we're going to kick off this one just by having a general Sarah and Debbie chat, as we like to do, talking about some of the things that we think will be perhaps top of mind as you contemplate your own recovery in this early part of the year, and drawing on some insights and reflections of what we went through and how we faced that January period. So, co-host Sarah, hello, how are you?
Happy New Year, Debbie, and everybody else.
Yeah, to you too. You've had a bit of a time, haven't you? We were going to catch up, just for the listeners to know. We were going to catch up on the second. So we weren't going to be celebrating New Year's together. We were going to be having a good old Wednesday's Child hug on January the 2nd. And it all went a bit Pete Tong, didn't it?
Yeah, we had a bit of a do with the car when I was in London. And I had my car down there, James's car down there, Amy. She had to get back for school, and it was and we ended up doing a tow truck relay. It was quite funny. It was like something you'd see in a Carry On movie. James on like the back of different tow trucks coming up the M1 all the way to Middlesbrough. So unfortunately, Debbie, we didn't get to have our Wednesday's Child hug, but we will soon.
We didn't, but I'm planning to come up northeast real soon. So we will get something in the diary, I'm sure. Do you know what? We should probably tell everybody on the group, like when we're going to be together at a particular location, and just see if anybody would turn up in said hotel or cafe and just say,
Have a party, take over.
Doing an in conversation with us live rather than listening to us on the pod. Okay, well, I suppose when I saw your story unfold, it did make me think, well, I wonder how the Sarah that's tackling that today is differing from the Sarah that in the kind of midst of illness and recovery would have been dealing. We talk so often, don't we, about like the imperfect in an imperfect world. When something goes wrong, how you handle it when you're trying to tackle eating disorder recovery. Any sense of quite what choice words you would have come up with when that had all gone wrong?
Choice words. Well, my choice word this week, my choice thought, sorry, this time was thank God I wasn't driving, because then we would have had a massive fight because it would have been my fault at that point. But anyway, that's an aside. We've said this millions of times, but I think the reason why we say it a lot is because it is so important. Is that any event like that or anything that just puts a spanner in the works, or in my case, literally a pothole in the road, the phrase flexibility comes in, and how the rigidity of the illness or any form of eating disorder really makes it, when there's any life event that occurs, so be it a nice celebration like Christmas, New Year, a broken down car, that inflexibility and that rigidity that comes with it makes it so that it becomes just catastrophic, when actually it isn't really a catastrophe. It was just a bit of an inconvenience.
Yeah. And it allows all that other eating disorder behaviour to step in then, doesn't it? Oh, well, it's all gone wrong now. Oh, well, yeah. Inevitably, I wasn't meant to eat beyond this point, and this wouldn't have happened if this happened.
Exactly. And it's like simple things. So like when it happened, the next day we then had to quickly go and try and get the car back. So we had to just run out the house. We got into my car, and I was like, oh God, we haven't had breakfast. Like, oh well. And then before I know it, it was like really late. So we had to fly back home. And I literally got like 2 pieces of bread and a chunk of ham and went like, shut them together and ate that, and but sometimes that's what life has to be about. It has to be about eating on the run. It has to be about putting fuel in yourself in a manner of which your actual crazy busy day is making it happen. It can't always be about having a sit down in the same place with the same plate and the same napkin and the same food. And then obviously you're driving home and you're thinking, oh my goodness, when we're going to go. So I said, Amy, run into Costa and just grab something. So she came back with stuff that there is no way in the world I would have eaten a few years ago. But you're then there having to eat it because it's all that's on offer because you're in this kind of moment where you're trying to sort life out.
Yeah. And actually, I think recovery happens in a way when we are less focused on our poorly state and more focused on, as you say, just living life, and yeah, not kind of looking back or feeling entrenched in our behaviors and regret and thoughts.
And just getting on with it. But anyway, that was my crazy New Year. Did you have a time at home?
I did. Do you know what I said? I said to someone I befriend, didn't have a very exciting one in the end. Things kind of changed somewhat at the last minute for New Year's Eve, which often seems to happen, I find, with New Year's Eve. People decide they're going to change their plans. So for a short while, I was like, oh, this wasn't meant to happen like this. I'm really disappointed about this. And this is going to sound so dull and so boring when I tell you what I did. But I had an evening in my PJs, in my room, decluttering of preparing clothes to take to a charity shop, which is so stupid. But over the Christmas period, I've been telling myself, I'm going to do that. I really want to do that because I've got some clothes that I know I'm not going to wear anymore. And kept saying to myself, oh, I'm going to. And I just got so stuck into it and got really organized. And then by the end of it, I'd kind of reorganized toiletries and I'd reorganized. So it's a complete declutter fest with a film on in the background and, a bit of music at different times and then hearing some fireworks going off. And then I kind of went to bed probably before midnight, but, albeit it was quite an accomplished New Year's Eve. So it wasn't the most exciting, but it was okay. It was okay.
But that's what they tell us that New Year's Eve is supposed to be about, isn't it? That whole new start, new life, better life, which I know is something we'll probably talk about because we know that can cause an awful lot of distress in our community.
So let's get on to that. So you and I both know only too well that the social media platforms and the world and his wife in general is all kind of busy talking about New Year, new you. Couldn't hate that phrase more. I hated it when I was a journalist and we used to have to write it every year in headlines about feature content. Just infuriating them. But it's even more annoying when you're somebody who's experienced an eating disorder and know what the kind of subliminal messaging behind that is. That's kind of, you're not good enough, you're certainly not skinny enough, you're certainly not fit enough, you're certainly not healthy enough, so you've got to change this and you must change that, and you're certainly not appropriate to carry on with the life that you've had before. Whereas the reality is some of what you're doing right now is perfectly fine, and if you don't change it now and you don't change it in 6 weeks time, that's fine. But if you've changed some things already, that's okay too. And if you intend to change and then in 3 days time you slip up, well, that's okay, but just get back on the horse if that's what you want to do.
But why do we always have to change? I suppose that's my question to you. It always seems to be, it's never like kind of start this year doing as brilliantly as you did before, or start this year just having the best time ever. I don't know, I'm not articulating that very well, but it does seem to always be about that we're supposed to be constantly changing. I think there's a difference between developing and learning to changing.
Yeah. I think growth mindset. So I don't know if you've kind of ever talked about like that sort of, like, it goes back to, that kind of rigidity versus having a growth mindset. And a growth mindset always encourages us to take on new influences, to think about new things, look at things a different way. I think growth in that sense is always a good thing, but it doesn't have to mean that you must change your patterns of lifestyle. You join this, do that, radically overhaul everything you've ever done in the world. It doesn't require us to do that. I suppose maybe if you were going to say you wanted to change in any way, it would just keep your brain elastic and your mind open to new opportunity. I think that would be the one thing I would say to someone. If you don't feel if you are more of a rigid, fixed person versus kind of, change and available for opportunity, then I would kind of steer towards that growth mindset.
And again, from a recovery perspective and point of view, you do have to change behaviors. You do have to work on and adapt and shift behaviors in order to get well. And if you don't do that, then you won't have an elastic mind because your mind is totally focused on what it is that's making you poorly at that particular time. It's hard though. It's really, really hard to keep focused on recovery and to keep focusing on developing your recovered self when you are bombarded with all the stuff you're bombarded with from about the 24th of December. They don't even wait till Christmas these days. all the way through. It'll keep going, won't it, now till February, March, because they'll want to be trying to get as much money as possible out of everybody.
Oh, the amount of kind of emails I've had or posters I've seen or things I've seen on television that are all gym membership related, or diet shakes, this, that, the other, or it's infuriating in some ways, but at the same time it no longer, I suppose, where I acknowledge it now is I think, well, that's just life, and it's our choice as to whether to be absorbed in or affected by that which goes on around us. So I no longer get uptight about that stuff. There is an entire marketing world around that, and they know why it works. They know it does work. And I've got friends who know me very, very well, but are still suddenly on January the 1st deciding that they're going to, take up this, that, or the other because they're unhappy with themselves. And I can say all I would want, all I want about my own experiences and how I really wish they wouldn't go down that path. But everyone has to make their own choices.
I think what you said there, was really important, isn't it? And it's that kind of we always say, or we often advocate having a really good look at life when you're poorly, and do you need to make any huge shifts? So, like, just anecdotally for me, anyone that's listened to us will know that I stopped teaching. I had to, and I had to take a big chunk of time off in order to focus on recovery. And if I hadn't done that, Debbie, I honestly don't think I would have got as far as I've got, if anywhere at all.
And actually, there's some sort of coincidental factor in that it's probably around the early part of the year, isn't it? Because we've talked previously that you actually were in a unit over the festive period. Mm-hmm. And so you would have embraced the new year knowing that there had to be some kind of change and challenge to where your life had been previously.
But you also have to learn that you are going to always go back, or you're living still in the real world. And the real world isn't focused on giving us messaging to support eating disorder recovery. The real world is focused on giving us messaging to support economic growth. And one of the places that makes the most money for any country that it's in, it's to do with health and fitness and well-being and diet and all the stuff, that's looking like it's going to make your life great. But in our community, it has just got to be ignored. And we do have to learn and force ourselves to ignore it. And it's hard. It is really hard, but we do have to try and figure out a way of doing it. I actually was listening to a podcast just to do with work actually today, nothing to do with our community. And they're on about how some woman last year, she went on a social media sabbatical.
Ooh, interesting.
So she didn't say she'd left social media, and she didn't say she's ditched it. It was the fact that she was sabbatical. So she'd almost made it like a research project, that she was going to come off social media. And she chose this time of year specifically because she just didn't want another year where she felt like she was going to be started and bombarded by. So she took 3 months off and then gone back on. She runs this incredibly famous podcast, and she's a brilliant woman to listen to. But I just thought that was really interesting, that she'd protected her own mental health properly by not investing and engaging with the algorithms that are going to promote all sorts of things to you that you shouldn't be listening to.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I suppose if we're going to do what we often do about kind of creating things from our episodes of the podcast as sort of toolkit aids, one of them would be that, really, wouldn't it? Would be look at what you're doing by way of the engagement you use in social media. And I always kind of feel there's a sort of weird thing in saying that when we know so many people follow us on social media and we continue to put content out that's helpful on social media, but I would certainly say, if you didn't do anything early part of this year, just remind yourself where you get to with. Oh, is that your little friend in the background? She's muting herself. Look. Oh, she's just so courteous. Look, Sarah's muting herself. If you're watching us, you'll see that Sarah's got this panic-stricken face, trying to worry about her little pet friend.
I'm back in the room. I'm sorry about that.
Bless you.
It's like the beginning of COVID. You think I'd have learned by now. I didn't realize she was in here. She was curled up underneath the table. I think, but you always say, Debbie, you always advocate, periodically throughout your recovery, going through your accounts and seeing if they're still serving you right.
Yeah.
You speak about that an awful lot, about how just, someone who may start to help you out in the early stages of your recovery is not necessarily going to be the person who helps you out 6 months later, 6 years later, or whatever it is.
And I have to say, and I have to be really honest about it, and I don't know whether you do, but I certainly did start out following certain people and accepting friends and connections at a certain stage in my recovery. who I have now disconnected, disengaged with, just deleted, because I recognize, and this is not to cast blame on anybody, but some people are unhelpfully unrecovered and sharing content which I just find just less helpful. But at the same time, I'm very aware that we are all at an age and stage with our own recovery, and nobody should be kind of chastised for the point that we get to. And I received an email from someone before Christmas, and it's really made me reflect about how you and I often talk about, not being stuck in quasi recovery. And I just want to kind of state this for the record, and feel free to jump in on your thoughts on this, Sarah, that never when we have talked as hosts of this podcast, never when we have talked about quasi recovery and the need to push on and to go beyond the 80% and all that stuff, never when we have said that have we sought to suggest that you aren't trying hard enough, that you are a lesser person, that we don't support your intention to be well, and also that we don't understand how, don't swear, difficult it is to get beyond that phase. And I say that as somebody who got so stuck in that place. I still was doing much better than I was when I was really so poorly, but I had got stuck. I really had got stuck. So whenever we talked about that 80-20 or the quasi, it really isn't to chastise anybody. It's completely cognizant of how bloody difficult it is, and how for some people it will just be fine to maintain themselves for maybe a period of months until they're ready to push on again. And I wonder whether for some people New Year introduces that question again about where am I in that. Like, if I look at my recovery journey, as we always say, it's not linear, have I just kind of have I kind of just got to some kind of, I don't know, like where it's all leveled off, and do I need to just try and push on again?
Yeah, and it's checking in on yourself. So there's no, like you said, there's no judgment as to folks who might feel stuck at all, but it is checking in on yourself as to if there is potential to keep moving forward. And if there is potential to keep moving forward, then you must keep moving forward. If there's potential to keep moving forward and you don't, then it might be because at that moment, like you said, it's too overwhelming, it's too challenging, but it's there, there's the potential to still move forward. So the minute that it feels like that you could now take that next leap of faith, and they are blind leaps of faith because we don't know what it's going to feel like or be like. But when it does feel like you're ready to do that, then you must push forward, because you'll lose that moment in time, and then you will be stuck then for a longer period. And we know that the longer that you remain in that quasi state, like anything, the harder it is to then get back out again. And we all know when we should or shouldn't be doing certain things, and when we're telling ourselves it's because it's keeping us safe or right or what have you. And it does take an awful lot of strength to read yourself well enough to see when you could move forward, and then to actually physically do it.
Yeah, and I would suggest really thinking about being aware of yourself and what your behaviors are, and your kind of mindset shifts, that when it's sometimes, what are those little actions that you do that are less helpful? So do you find yourself kind of reducing the size of a portion of food that you're having, or do you turn down one or two more social engagements than you had been doing just because you're a little bit nervous about the food? Or do you find yourself going back to parking further away from somewhere because you're just going to do a little bit more lower body movement? Just kind of check in with yourself about those things. And again, I will say that as hand on heart, I know that. So, those of you that know me very well will know that, I've had a kind of a bit of a year of it, and we've had some kind of, news as a family recently that sort of made me kind of at different times a little bit more emotional. And I recognize that when I am feeling a bit more wobbly, those are times when I have to go, oh, I'm doing that thing again.
Yeah.
And it's not oh my God, I'm right back where I was. It's never anything like that, but it's something that I can say, oh, but I'm doing it because it's helping my mind deal with this other thing that I'm really worried about. So whether that be walking a little bit more than I should be, or thinking about maybe a run would help me to get rid of my stress, or maybe I don't need to have an extra snack because I'm just not really feeling like it today. And actually, all that's about a different kind of emotion. It's to do with something entirely different and unrelated, but they are little behaviors that I have to kind of like, I shared it with a best friend the other day. I said to her, like, oh, for God's sake, just tell me to sit down and shut up. Like, because, if we go and walk here, or if we do this, and, we made a direct kind of, very deliberate choice, I suppose, that so this is a particular friend that I often join her for a dog walk. I don't have a dog, but I often join her for a dog walk. It's lovely to have a nice walk through a forest that's really near here. I'm gonna have a good natter. And I just found myself saying, do you know what? I really just need to sit on my ass for a couple of hours, have something to eat and drink, and just pull myself together, because I've just not been looking after myself or getting enough sleep or doing all those and actually it was really helpful just to say it out loud, because in my worst times I wouldn't have done that. I would have allowed those little things to creep back in.
You said it out loud. Hallelujah. That's my favorite thing in the entire world, saying things out loud. But I think this is a nice time of year, isn't it, to maybe do that. If you're thinking about your recovery and you're wondering about where to start to push the next level, or where to start in general, it is maybe looking at those little things, because often those little behaviors are the things that can keep you stuck for longer. I found in my recovery, but also they can be things that just small. I when I'm at work, I talk about like just slight shifts in habits. Slight shifts in habit can be all it takes in order to make a big long-term shift. And one of the things I know that I definitely did was have a really hard, close and honest look to myself about what I was doing with people versus what I was doing by myself.
Ooh, okay.
Because I would.
So would you say isolation was a big part of your?
Yeah, but also kind of that like going out and going, yes, I'm eating spaghetti bolognese. But if I was by myself, I'd eat bullshit spaghetti bolognese.
Right.
So like, and that little kind of, it's still spaghetti bolognese, but the version you have at Zzz's is going to be very different potentially than the version that you cook when you're by yourself. Or, yes, I'll have a piece of birthday cake. And then someone gives you the slice to bring home, because you're by yourself again, you don't have the birthday cake. And it's that kind of, I just find it really helpful to think about the things that I was priding myself on, I was able to then now do when I was with someone. Is that the same when I'm by myself? Because if not, then I'm not honoring myself properly. I'm not recovering from it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you look back on like sort of this time of year and wish that friends, family maybe had said other things to you or behaved a different way? Was there anything else that would have been helpful, particularly at this time of year, that you really feel would have aided your efforts around your recovery?
I'm not sure in particular from this time of year. And to be honest, when you're poorly, when I was poorly, it didn't matter kind of what folks were saying around me. I knew better and best anyway, so I wasn't ever listening. For me, all of that emotional kind of horrendous phase, which is so important and so crucial and just actually brilliant when you look back, comes when you're nutritionally rehabilitated and your brain is functioning to an extent that you can access emotions properly, and then they come like a tsunami, and then everything people are saying, you're like, oh my word, oh goodness me, like, and you do have an element of, well, why didn't you tell me that 2 years ago? Well, there was no point telling you that 2 years ago because you wouldn't have been listening. But I think that's where like training and counseling and care for carers is really important, so they know when you're ready to listen. Because if you're badgering somebody and they're not in a mindset to be able to hear anything, it is a badger, and it feels aggressive and it feels it's being done to you. Whereas when that person is in a cognitive state where they can begin to have that emotional reaction and take it on, then it's not badgering, it is empathic and it is developmental and it is supportive. But your average person doesn't know how to do that. An expert, a specialist should be there on hand with carers and loved ones and the support network to say, right, look, she's getting to a stage now where she's going to take on board some of the things that we all think. So let's have a go.
And I would say, while we're on the kind of carer topic, I would just say, if you are a carer and you're kind of listening to this and thinking, oh, tell me something that I can cling on to, like to make 2023 a better year for their recovery or whatever, I think about some of the behaviours and kind of just the dialogue that you're using as we enter into this new year. Look at the way you're living out your life and portraying yourself, and how in very, very small but pernicious ways they might impact on your loved one. And I know that there'll be people thinking, oh my God, it's always about me having to change my life to suit them and whatever. But, you know, we've said it before, things like being wedded to your idea of having to have like this, diet this, no, you know, no fat this and whatever. Is that ultimately really that helpful? Would it be any harm to have in your fridge or cupboard actually stuff that you're hoping that your loved one is going to feel encouraged and enthused to have? And equally, when you're wanting to chastise yourself for whatever it is that you've been eating or overindulging on, if that's the way you see it, or not doing the level of exercise that you have, is there a need to have that conversation? And do you need to be a little bit more choosy about to whom you're talking to about those kind of things, and certainly not beating yourself up about, you know, your body and those things? So there are always ways that we, as parents, carers, loved ones, supporters, spouses, there are things that we can do. And it's just that extra thought, you know, just as you would perhaps trying to think about how we choose our language around children and what we say to them when they start questioning us about, you know, mummy, does this look okay? And what do you think of this? And am I this? And am I that? And have I got a big spot on my nose? You know, as adults, we try really hard with younger children to be really delicate. If you've got somebody that you are very close to who is in more vulnerable stages with their recovery, actually what you say matters hugely. These are all little kind of, almost, I like to think they're kind of like paper cuts, you know, they're kind of tiny little things, but by heck, they can hurt and they can build up, and they, you know, and they can cause us a lot of pain if handled in the wrong way. And so maybe just as a parent or a carer, think about that in the next kind of few days and weeks.
Yeah, without doubt. I went a bit quiet there because I was trying to think of a really intelligent response, and I can't, because everything you said is just spot on.
Well, I hasten to say that when, you know, when we have these conversations, I do always worry that I suppose I try and visualize what would my parents have done, or how would they have reacted, and equally for that parent or carer that's in this utter state of fear and distress, you know, sometimes it feels like we're just saying, oh, and here's one more thing you can change this. And I don't ever want it to be about that, because at the same time, I very much believe that family life must have its non-negotiables. You've got to carry on as normal. There's often other siblings, or, you know, there's your own kind of, if you're a spouse or a partner, you know, you've got your own kind of love and affection needs, and you want life to continue. And so it can't all be about saying, so here's just something else you should alter about your world in order to help that person get better. But I do equally think it's just worth reminding each other that actually, yeah, we probably do those little things a little bit too hastily, or, you know, we talk about stuff in a way that perhaps is insensitive, although not ill-intended.
And that's, you know, we commit to our partners and our children when we have them, you know, for better, for worse, etc. So you do take the rough with the smooth. But that's why, again, at Wednesday's Chat, we always advocate that the carers need the support too. So be it befriending for the carer, be it support groups, be it I heard something today talking about how no one should ever cry alone, and to make a pact with your friends, even whether you're male, female, or however you identify, making a pact with your friends that no one is going to, in our friendship group, going to cry alone. So the minute you feel like you're getting upset, you pick up the phone and you say in your pack, Heather, I'm going to cry. And that person just sits there and goes, okay. And either you sit in silence and sob, but you're not by yourself, or you talk it through and then end up sobbing or not sobbing. But I just thought that in itself, it doesn't need to be a fancy pants therapist. It can be that the folks that you've got, you just make a pact that nobody in this little group's going to cry alone, and your phone will go, or even, you know, and you'll just pick it up and it'll just be someone, and all they just need to say is, I need to cry. And I thought that kind of really light touch support actually is sometimes all you need when you're not the person in recovery. That's different, but the person who's potentially supporting you just need to know that there are other people there when you just got to say, I can't take this anymore, I just need to cry. But never do it by yourself.
Yeah, no judgment, just here, just
yeah.
Yeah, I think so true. And also off the back of a busy Christmas period, and I don't know about you, but it feels like we're being bombarded even more with the kind of negative news about what's to come this year and all the stuff that we've got to worry about. You can have the best family life in the world, but actually that stuff can still feel quite deep and heavy, I suppose is the emotion I would say. It's just, you know, wow, this is the ride we're in for. And that's without the fact that you might be living with, loving somebody with a really awful mental health issue, which perhaps you've tried to get them help for and you haven't managed to do that because of services being stretched or whatever it is. So yeah, at that time, like, you know, I think just go easy on yourself and
definitely
find who it is that is your cheerleading squad, just so you can pick up the phone to somebody.
And if you're the person with the illness and you're on the cusp, you're in that quasi state and you're on the cusp of, oh, I do think this might be the right time for me to take the next leap, then you'll never know unless you do take that leap what it's like. And trust me, it's loads better. But also, it's like with all the other stuff that we keep being told, just an absolute car crash in England at the moment or in the world at the moment, then don't let this last 20% add to that car crash. Like, just if you think you're in the right state to take that next leap into true and real recovery, then do it, because there's other stuff going on that's too difficult. And I can't tell Rishi Sunak what to do, but I can tell my eating disorder to piss off, you know. So and for me, that for the individual that's suffering, if you're on that quasi cusp and you're thinking, I think this is the right time, then don't think any longer. Get off your seat right this second, or sit on a bench if you're listening to this on your walk rather than finishing off your walk and phone your mate to come and pick you up, or go downstairs and have a massive glass of full fat milk or a milkshake or whatever it is and say, right, this is it, this is it now. I'm taking that leap. And then no one will have to cry alone, because you'll all be super, super happy because you've got that monkey off your back finally.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points. I think also worth just reiterating for those of you that are thinking, oh my God, cost of living crisis and all the financial stretch that's going to be on me, on us, on the family. If you're in a situation where you are somebody who earns an income and are worrying about, can you manage to do your work, but can you not, or perhaps you feel you can't afford to not be working because of the kind of financial pressures on your home life at this time, just remember that there are times when we have to make decisions about whether recovery requires us to step back, and do we need that extra percent of energy and time to put into restoring ourselves for full recovery. Sarah, I know, you know, you and I talk about it often. It was something you had to step off in order to move forward with your life. You had to get fully recovered, so therefore you stepped out of a very successful career, but in a way it was the kind of the securing of your recovery, wasn't it, by doing that?
Yeah. And but that's a really good point you make, Debbie, because of the situation that we're in and mortgages and rent, etc. If you're in a position where you honestly don't feel like you can take a step back, then you really have to have a very honest conversation with a trustworthy person, preferably in HR, who can put the reasonable adjustments in place to help you with your recovery. And those reasonable adjustments are determined by you. And if your work's saying no, then you've got to go back to your doctor and say, doctor, help me. I'm asking for support. I have a mental illness. They should be helping me out. And your reasonable adjustments can be to extend your lunchtime, to move it to 11, because that's when you need to have, you know, your bigger portion of your food, to, I don't know, to make it so that you're on the ground floor, so you're not walking up 5 flights of stairs, whatever it is. Ask for reasonable adjustments so that you can still work, you can still earn, you'll be doing a brilliant job at work, because those people with eating disorders, we don't do anything by halves. They're not going to want to lose you, so they can be helping you to make it so that you can thrive in work.
Yeah. And again, just flipping that onto younger persons, perhaps you're caring for someone who's a younger person, you might be having, I know I've already spoken, we've only had, I think, some of the schools around here have only been back 2 days, and I've already had an email from a teacher saying that they're thinking that they're going to have a conversation with the parents saying that they really shouldn't be sending their child back right now because they've made more of a decline over the Christmas period. So again, if you're a parent and you just think the priority for that child is not to be back in school dealing with mock exams, but is instead to be at home or accessing the right therapist or just getting a bit of time and rest, then we always think certain things in life are ultimately really, really important, but actually what's more important than being healthy for the long term? What's more important than securing our future? And I know lots of people say, well, my child having straight A's at her GCSEs or whatever is the vital. But I think we all can agree that health and happiness is fundamental. So whatever that looks like and whatever you've got to put in place, I'd make that the focus for 2023. I'm gonna start to bring this to a close now, because I realised we were just going to have our initial welcome to the new year joyous introduction to Wednesday's Child podcast again. It hasn't been very joyous, but I think we've touched on some points that will be important for a number of you that can listen to this regularly and need some help, either as somebody who is a carer or is going through recovery. Just a reminder that Sarah hit on some of our services earlier, that obviously we do befriending not only for people that are going through eating disorder recovery, but also for parents and carers as well. We've got a couple of relationships that are forming on a befriending level for some parents, and that's been really helpful over Christmas. So whether you want to get in touch because you're a parent carer who would like some befriending support, or you think you'd like to put yourself forward, please do drop us a line. That would be very much appreciated. And likewise, if you think you're fully recovered and have been for some time and would like to support someone else going through the journey, then we are always accessible and appreciative. Likewise, I know it's very, very difficult to get referred to services. If you want to try and access one of our therapists, and I'd love to say that as much as well, I will say as much as possible we will provide what we can for free, but at the moment we have such little funding. I'll be really open with you all that we're certainly not government funded, we're not getting NHS funding. We get bits and pieces of donations here and there, and we apply to different community voluntary body organisations that occasionally allocate some funding. So we're lucky enough to get some in certain areas, but where we don't, we do at least have the therapists that we can access, and we can be very straight with you and say, look, usually within 7 days we can find you an appointment with that person, but this is what the cost is, and we certainly don't profit over that. But as you can imagine, these are real specialists in eating disorders. We don't just choose woolly counsellors who had no experiences in the nuances of eating disorders. So if you do want to be sort of receiving help from one of our specialists, then we're very, very happy to connect you up to them. Included in that, of course, is Isabel. And Isabel was somebody that was really popular with you all that did a podcast episode. I think our previous one before Christmas now, but our tapping episode just before Christmas. And she's going to do another episode with us in a week or so's time. So we'll be sharing that with you again, just more about tapping and some of the other kind of therapeutic approaches that she uses, and some other great tips for starting the new year. And she's also available as a therapist to us if you're interested in her helping you, either as a parent carer or your loved one, or yourself if you're going through a recovery journey. So that's enough from me. I'm going to let you go, Sarah. Get back to your family and your dog.
Well, the dog's shut up now. Typically, she shuts up when we're about to finish. The fam have just gone out for the front door go, so I'm actually all by myself.
Aww.
So I might have a bag of crisps and watch a crappy TV show.
Perfect. Great way to end your midweek working day. Sounds a good idea.
Indeed. Thank you, Debbie, as always.
Thank you everyone for listening to the latest Wednesday's Child podcast episode. If you've got any comments, feel free to send them in to hello@wednesdayschild.co.uk. Don't forget to keep sending your ideas for future episodes, and we will see you again really, really soon. Thanks again. Keep focused on recovery.